And you are watching KCAL 9 News at noon. We continue to follow breaking news on the Capitol. You can see thousands of people have just converged on the Capitol. They have been able to get inside, and we saw them breaking windows to get in. Joining us now is Representative Tony Cardenas, joining us now also by phone with more insight. Thank you so much for joining us, Representative. I'm taking it that you have been able to see this and that you are in a safe place at this time?
Yes, I am in the Capitol, and I am in a safe place, thank God, and I appreciate all the men and women who are protecting us, and I'm praying that everybody just calms down and allows us to get back to our democratic process.
Can you give us a little idea of you all were just in there and then began hearing something or got warnings to get under your, we've heard that that people were told to get under their chairs and get the mask for tear gas. Can you give us a little idea of what you heard and what you were told?
There were loudspeakers, and we have facilities to have these kinds of emergency announcements. So those announcements did take place as you just described, and everybody in their respective places were instructed to take shelter and to be careful. And like you said, on the House floor, people were asked to get on the floor.
And I know that you perhaps have known about these warnings, you've heard these messages, but have you ever experienced anything quite like this, where people were actually able to breach the House floor? We've seen images of them taking pictures using fire extinguishers. Have you ever seen anything or even expected anything like this?
No, we have never expected anything like this, where they actually breached the Capitol, as the windows that you've seen over and over that they were able to break. It was a few years ago that a woman in a car actually hit one of the barricades surrounding the Capitol, but I've never seen a situation where people have entered the Capitol with malintent and have breached our security like they did today.
And we know that there are often protests there and large gatherings of folks that have showed up at the Capitol. But have you ever quite seen this tone, this feel, this desperation of people just willing to, break down the barricades and break windows to get inside?
Yes, I wouldn't describe it as desperation. I would describe it as anger incited by the President of the United States to get people to believe that what they're doing today has some semblance of responsibility to their country, and it's the exact opposite. And it's just unfortunate when the most powerful person on the planet goes to a rally just a few blocks away from the United States Capitol and encourages masses of individuals to go ahead with anger and malintent in their heart to come and storm their own United States Capitol. It's a shame, and I'm here praying that people come to their senses and realize that we are a great country with a lot of beautiful things to be proud of, and what's happening today is a stain on not only their actions, but a stain on the history of our country.
And do you think that 14 days from now anything's going to change, or what do you think needs to be done to really change the tone of our country right now?
Well, 14 days from now, Donald Trump will no longer have the title of President of the United States. He will continue to speak, I'm sure. He will continue to try to incite violence like he's done for so many years, but he will no longer have the authority of the President of the United States. And President Joe Biden will be that president, and he will speak of peace. He will speak of respect. He will speak of making sure that we all respect each other and not disrespect each other. And he will constantly remind all Americans that nothing good comes of violence, unlike the current president, Donald Trump.
Well, we do know that President Trump tweeted that people should respect the Capitol Police and be peaceful, but he has not told them to leave. What do you think that he needs to do at this point?
Donald Trump is consistent. It was not too long ago then when he was asked in full view of the American people to ask the white supremacists to stop what they're doing, and the best he could muster was stand down and stand by. So when the President of the United States tells people to be angry, encourages them to be angry, and only specifically asks them to be respectful to a certain segment of our community, again, he is acting irresponsibly, and he is only encouraging this kind of incident to happen. So much of this lays on the shoulders of President Donald Trump. And at any given moment, he could change his tune, and he could reach into his heart and ask people to please go home and to allow the democratic process to continue and to stop this violence and to stop allowing their anger to actually institute what they do with themselves and hurt other people.
We can only hope that he would do that and that people would begin to leave this area. We do know that the mayor has really instituted a 6 p.m. curfew. Do you think that will have an impact on all of these thousands of people? And do you think that the resources are there to really get these people out peacefully and in a good manner to really keep the peace?
Unfortunately, it's obvious now that the amount of resources that was necessary was not made available and put in place before this incident happened just a couple of hours ago. However, what we understand is every moment, every hour that goes by, there are going to be more and more resources. And I just hope and pray that we restore order. I hope and pray that there is no more bloodshed. And I just hope and pray that people continue to respect their community and continue to respect each other and to stop acting in anger as the president has encouraged them to do.
And we are hearing that Virginia's governor will be sending in 200 state troopers. We've also learned that Homeland Security will be sending in federal agents. We have been seeing images now on the right of your screen where you could see the folks that had breached the floor. We did see some of them literally laying on the floor. It looked as though there were officers with guns drawn and they were on the floor. But you can certainly just see the sheer amount of people that were able to get in. And certainly this is a concern. When we were speaking with Congresswoman Bass, you know, she was just talking about the security in this area. And for these folks to be able to make their way in, she felt that there may be someone inside that helped them because there was such strong security.
Unfortunately, that description is possible, but I will tell you is this. After today's incidents, it's a stain on the history of our country, and I can guarantee you that we are going to make sure that the safety of all of the people in our U.S. Capitol, and I'm talking first and foremost of our public servants, our staff members, people that should be allowed to do the great work for the people of this country without having to fear for their lives, that our security is going to be stronger, it is going to be better, and it will be made a safer place than it has been before today.
And of course, you know, work was underway with the Electoral College, and, you know, this had to be stopped. You know, things need to be, you know, continued on. They need to continue. We need to get to January 20th with a certain amount of things that need to take place to get there, to make this happen correctly. And are you concerned that this could happen again before we get to January 20th and really put things off?
I believe that what you're seeing, the incident today, on what is normally a moment that passes without much attention or fanfare, where the Electoral College votes are read in a joint session of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. This scene that you're seeing right now that we've seen develop over the last couple of hours, I do not believe that it will repeat itself in any fashion whatsoever on January 20th. I believe that January 20th will be much more peaceful and without this kind of incident. And again, I'm a very proud American, and I'm proud of our country. My heart aches for what we see and know that has happened today. And I do not believe that that is going to repeat itself again anytime soon.
Do you think that will be the case even if President Trump does not call for that?
It's unfortunate that I don't see Donald Trump changing his ability to move people like he did today. I pray that he does. I've never seen any evidence of it. He's been consistent throughout his life. He was consistent during his campaign to be president. He's been consistent to this day for the last 4 years that he's been president. So it's unfortunate that I can't, with any honesty, say that I believe that Donald Trump would change his tune.
Do you feel that because this was really kind of the final step in the Electoral College vote being read, do you think that this is maybe perhaps the final straw and the last-ditch effort, and perhaps after this is completed, there will be peace?
I pray that this was the last-ditch effort for such a ridiculous effort that was encouraged by President Donald Trump. And I just pray that people come to their senses and that people look within their heart and realize that this is just not becoming of an American. This is not becoming of the beautiful country that we are. And they've now created a stain on our history, and that it never, ever repeat itself.
It is certainly tough to see the images that we've been watching this afternoon of just thousands of people there, and seeing the images of the people that were able to breach the Capitol, that were on the floor opposing, taking pictures, using fire extinguishers, breaking windows, and just anything that they could do to get inside to make a stand. And this has just really been a tough time. And you really have to wonder if we can get back to a peaceful time in our country now, or even on January 20th.
I guarantee you that we will be, tonight will be more peaceful than it was just a few hours ago. Tomorrow will be much more peaceful than today. And yes, we will return to a much more peaceful America. The kind of energy that they're trying to sustain, I believe, will not sustain itself. It's unfortunate that not enough people elected to office in Washington were willing to speak up against this kind of action. But hopefully people will find the courage to encourage people to be peaceful, to be more caring to their fellow Americans, and not to be so hasty to use their anger to dictate their actions.
Do you think there's anyone that can really get that message out to those people besides President Trump?
I would love to see a chorus between Donald Trump encouraging people to be peaceful, but I don't see that happening. But one thing that I can guarantee you, the most consistent person during these times has been our incoming president, our president-elect, Joe Biden. And I'm praying that people heed his words, and the fact that he is encouraging Americans to be the best that they can be, instead of Donald Trump encouraging Americans to be the worst that they can be.
And I have to tell you that we are looking at some live images right now inside the Capitol. I was under the impression that everyone had been evacuated, but there are still plenty of folks inside here. We saw someone with a mask. Unfortunately, the camera is moving now, but you can still see there are people. It looks as though some people have been hiding there in the chairs here. I don't know if you can see this along with us, but can you give me an idea? Are you thinking that these folks are, who would you think that this group is?
The group that caused this violence?
No. If you're able to see the people that look like they're still hiding, perhaps,
yes.
we see, is this?
Yes, I recognize the faces. Some of them are staff, some of them are members of Congress. And again, I'm praying for them, and I'm praying for their safety. And again, we're just so blessed, so many brave men and women who are doing their job to make sure that they keep everyone as safe as possible.
Mm-hmm. It's such a large complex there for officers to clear and make sure that there is no one hiding. We certainly appreciate all of your insight, Representative Cardenas from Panorama City. We certainly appreciate your time and speaking with us.